Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar.
Yeah.
Hello, Rick. Good morning.
Yeah.
Still some distancing, but
yeah,
I think
still, it's good to see you, man.
it's good to see you again live. We have something for you today. Welcome to Betatalks Live. It's all about serverless this month. It's Serverless September. First of all, my name is Oscar van Tol. I work at Betabit for a while. I can do these kinds of fun things.
Yeah.
Next to me is the other guy from Betatalks, Rick van der Bos.
I'm Rick. I also work for Betabit, and well, both of us are able to do these kinds of fun stuff and dive into interesting techniques. For instance, serverless, and then Serverless September is now. So
yeah, indeed. So we're kicking off the Serverless September, video-wise now. In this webinar, we're going to cover a lot of topics. Gonna go speed through it, and the rest of the month we're going to go talk as much about serverless as possible. Serverless September is indeed, as the quote says, the once-in-a-year opportunity to not to shut up about serverless.
Yeah.
Since the beginning, I've been pretty loud about it. So have you?
Yeah, because I think it's the next way forward for computing, or maybe even different types of resources, as we will see today. Just one small addition to the fact that we're doing a lot of serverless content this month. We have this website, betabit.nl, but then also we have betabit.nl/serverless September. We will join all of our content over there, which ranges from blog posts to videos to blog posts from other people that are very interesting or parts of documentation. So please to
Also, don't be afraid to send it to us, share it.
Sure.
We'll echo it a bit. We're gonna see that the world sees some extra serverless content this month. Serverless. How did we get here? Where are we now in the cloud and everything? The world at the moment is changing faster than ever before. We see disrupting companies coming from nowhere, challenging the big players. The speed to adapt for them is unknown. They need to adapt, the big players. And for a while now, we've been also helping people with that. But at the moment, technology provides connectivity because the world definitely got challenged this year again.
Yes. I think you saw it too. There was this nice comic where you have people sitting around the table, digital transformation. That's not happening anytime too soon. And then you see this big wrecking ball with COVID written on it.
Yeah, indeed, that's it. Because we couldn't even imagine the way if this happened 5 or 10 years ago, if this technology we're all using now on a daily basis that wasn't ready yet.
That would have been horrible.
That would have been really horrible. At the moment, it's not fun for anyone. But I think we're doing our best to survive this and to actually continue and thrive in this.
True.
In the past decade, you and I have been working with Azure for as long as it exists. We've been helping development teams, CTOs, getting their journey into the cloud or a startup, deciding some architectures. To actually, it's like, how does this cloud work and what is cloud? And we've been evangelizing this from the beginning.
Yeah. And of course, we've seen that the cloud itself has also been changing rapidly. Right? Because
really
it started with cloud roles and web roles and then VMs, and that was actually it.
Indeed. So what we saw in the discussions in the beginning, we were talking about workload patterns. We were talking about scale, about a quick scale up, a quick scale down. So it was always a control in performance and cost. Because we were in the Azure environment, which started with more like PaaS kind of solutions, in opposite to Amazon that just started with just here's some VMs, have fun.
Pure EMs.
So there was a bit different approach. So for us, the PaaS mentality was default. What we always used is an analogy: pizza as a service. I don't know if you remember it. I had it on slides, and I used it time and time again to explain something. Because in In a cloud environment, you have some different approaches, and indeed we have, and they still exist today. You have the infrastructure as a service, we have platform as a service, and we had pure software as a service. Was always a nice comparison. I'm not even thinking about the on-prem yet, but it was also still always always in this slide. But it evolved so quickly. It went so fast. So within those,
I recognize that one.
Yeah,
the bottom left one.
No, the old portal.
That was Silverlight, right?
Interesting. But there's been some evolution going on in all forms, and because of that, it also grew together again. It was really interesting to see. For me, a really hard one to absolutely judge, because you can get into a discussion about that. But for me, the pinnacle of infrastructure as a service is containers. You have full control.
Yeah, I think so too.
On what you're delivering, but on the other hand, everything else is so abstracted away. And if you look at platform as a service from the beginning, that was about scaling, controlling cost, and just running your code, not much more.
True. Just
your code. But it had also not the most advanced, but always had some default setups, some default scaling options, but also some default menu to pick from. You cannot fully customize it. You couldn't fully customize the OS. That was a way. If you wanted that, you went to VMs and infrastructure as a service. The actual final evolution where we are now from platform as a service, in my opinion, and you really see that in the way it got branded with products we already knew, is serverless. So the whole serverless is platform as a service on its top, I would say.
Sometimes it even creeps towards software as a service.
Yeah, but it's also from the eye of the beholder, who's using it. For a developer, something like a full serverless data storage service or whatever. It's software.
Yeah.
I don't care. You
just use it.
I use the interface, which is an API, but it's an interface for me.
True.
So it feels a bit like indeed SaaS tool, and that's the strong part. The thing is with the serverless, umbrella term, what it is. And it's also hip, so nice to brand on something you already owned. It's well, this is by definition also a bit serverless.
Everybody's looking for serverless. I'll slap that on there and
indeed
give it a go.
We can discuss the name. It's not without service like the M2X you see here. It's fun, but there is a server somewhere. But on the end, in the end, the definition has it that you can actually scale to zero. That's the big difference still with most things I still categorize as platform as a service towards serverless.
Yeah.
It's if it scales to zero, absolutely zero cost, zero servers
based on usage,
zero host, then it is becoming serverless.
True.
But there is some infrastructure to spin that up once you have activity, and we go into a discussion. We will probably talk about that cold starts and stuff. But there are multiple things, and you see here you have compute, because that's the first thing you would think about, like functions as a service, fast.
That's also where it started, right? It started with serverless is where you don't have to think about compute and the resources you need.
Mm-hmm.
And here's my code, just run it. But now serverless has expanded to, like it says here, for instance, SQL Database Serverless, which we will talk about in a little bit, but also Cosmos DB Serverless. Those are not just platforms where you can run your code, they actually store data.
Yeah.
But that's also now part of the serverless family. So serverless itself is expanding.
This is exactly the list. I think we will touch on every one of these at least a bit.
Yeah, I think
today.
Yeah, the compute ones are well known, so we skip those. But
the compute ones are well known, so we'll not go too deep in them. But I think the Power Automate, talking about rebranding,
yeah,
and
Logic the URL is still the same.
I think for me they would more fall in the category of SaaS, but it's more because I'm a developer. It's I'm not really writing code, so
in Logic apps you can write code.
Yeah, so, there's some low code there. So, but that is it's getting vague. But yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah,
the pizza as a service, I'm not really using it anymore because it's just too much.
There's too much that changed because the containers came in there, and then serverless came in there, and then it's becoming, what you said, it's a bit vague.
Yeah.
So let's first dive into what we know, right? What we currently know about serverless, and that's just like you said, it doesn't mean that there's no servers. Just like wireless internet has a cable somewhere. The true meaning is that you as a developer, or maybe even as an ops person, don't have to think about those servers anymore.
Don't have to care.
Yeah, while serverless, again, is expanding rapidly. And then one of the things we see, as far as I'm concerned, is that there are premium versions of serverless services coming out, where you actually do specify number of cores or amount of memory or the min and max value of the amount of cores you can use. But that's all more in a configurative way than in a...
It's more abstract. You're not building something up. Someone did this for you, and they're introducing more control.
Yeah, and you're setting the bounds. That's the only thing you're doing. One thing as a small sidestep that I would like to mention now also, I think it's not only Microsoft with Azure, but also other cloud vendors. They are moving away from the old-fashioned resource names like CPUs and memory. I mean, you can see that already for a while in SQL Azure, where they have the data transfer units.
Yeah, DTU.
Yeah, and now, of course, in Cosmos DB, you have RUs per second, and for functions, you have gigabyte seconds. You can see that they're moving away from the traditional resource naming, also because they want to abstract away what you need to get to a specific point of performance, actually. Yeah,
indeed, and on one hand, it's good because we have one metric to compare one to the other. So if you have some experience, it also has a meaning for you. Like, we need more RUs here.
But there's a myth there.
But if you don't have experience, it's really hard to judge what is an RU. And you can read the theory. It's like you don't know nothing.
Yeah, it's reading one document that's 1 kilobyte one time. Yeah, that's one RU.
That's an RU, and same for the DTU. But if you don't have a feeling about what it actually can do,
true.
That is still difficult to judge. So sometimes it's nice also as a program to know, like, does this thing where it runs on, even if it's an Azure function, does it have one or multiple cores? Because then I will definitely take advantage of that writing this, because I know if it's not having any other cores, like it might not be too interesting to have 10 threads running at the same time.
Sure. So then why do you want to wait?
So sometimes we need to know a bit more, and you can always find out what's behind that. But indeed, we're seeing multiple metrics. The function seconds, I still cannot, like, as long as the bill is not too high, then...
I know it's the amount of memory you've used, average, with a minimum of 128 megabytes, and rounded up to the closest 128 megabytes, times the amount of milliseconds your code was actually running. That's the gigabyte seconds, and that also rounds up to, I think, 1 millisecond.
Yeah.
With a minimum of 128
then the question is, if you see the bill, what do you do? More or less.
Okay, you probably say, okay. Okay, so just one small add to the current slide. Serverless computing, or actually serverless in general, means an abstraction of servers or resources that you need with event-driven scale and micro-billing, and that's where your scaling to zero comes into play. If you can scale to zero,
then you definitely have micro-billing.
yes. And that means that you focus on apps or actually logic, and not on the infrastructure supporting you in getting there.
No, but that's what we're building, right?
Sure.
We're adding value, and let's focus on the value we're adding, because it's easy to get distracted about what shall we call this new server, and what we need to create PowerShell scripts to install this and that on it. We've all done that before,
but the only thing that was cool was the cute server names, right? That you came up with.
The problem is, like, after 3 years, you didn't want to kill them. They became pets.
Yeah, and you don't want pets in your basement. That's true. Okay, so going back to the services we know, or at least that both Oscar and I have been talking about a lot and also writing about, is Power Automate, Logic Apps, Azure Functions, which has the hosting plans, and of course consumption plan as being the most important, as far as I'm concerned, if you go into the naming, true serverless solution, which has triggers and bindings, which abstracts away a lot for you. And then you have the durable functions. I think this is, in general, where serverless actually started. And of course, Power Automate, which used to be Microsoft Flow,
Flow, yeah.
And the app is still called Flow that you have on your phone,
Mm-hmm.
and the URL is still flow.microsoft.com. However, in there everything.
We all did a name change once for something, and it's not easy.
7 times. Okay, but as far as the serverless compute things that we already know, these are them, right? And we've actually been using them in production, and I know you have too.
More than
quite
2.
extensively. Yeah, maybe more than 5.
Yeah.
But this is where it all started for us, and then the current version of those, or the previous versions of those services, actually also had a few drawbacks.
Well, the drawbacks. The cold start is most discussed, I think, in serverless compute. Like in FAS, like it has a cold start.
True.
If you want to scale to 0, there's no server listening.
Then there's nothing running.
So it's actually serverless at that moment. But if you then get a request and get requested, normally you want it to be served in 6 milliseconds. It's not going to happen because there's nothing. So this is an issue, and you saw all kinds of people just creating scripts and stuff to keep the thing hot.
Yeah.
The problem is then you
don't have 0, so
you're not. Yeah, you're preventing to be serverless at that moment. But you also saw from the platforms, especially Azure Functions, to introduce ways around that, optimizing the call, because sometimes you can predict like there's a call coming in right now, especially if you do some more async stuff. They have a scale controller in front of that that's actually checking out like you connected to this with the nice bindings and everything there. So we know, well, you need a couple of servers.
We see a message coming in, you're probably going to handle it, so I'll spin you up.
Yeah, so there's still pretty big gap for the cold start. And if you really don't want that, but you want to rapidly scale out with all the advantages, but like let's pay for the footprint because I'm really leaning on this architecture, you can go for instance, premium. And that means that there's at least one running, and long before it is to full, it will start up the next one.
Yep.
So you also don't have the issue that, we now scaled out, we are already hooking it into the load balancer. So even though it's really, really busy, you might get into a cold start problem.
Yeah, and that's not what you want.
That's not what you want.
That's the image that we used quite extensively with the graphs for premium, where you see that what they actually do is they
scale ahead.
Yeah, they over provision for you.
They over provision a bit.
They scale ahead, but that
definitely you pay more. I can tell you that. But it provides a premium function.
And you get more. So
you get more.
That's okay.
So you have also the maximum process time was one there. We had like a maximum configurable 10 minutes runtime, because the idea of serverless that you can also run it in extra compute power that's somewhere on a machine. That doesn't work if you need to fully provision it and that it needs to stay there. So they limited the runtime so that they can move those processes over all the time. And you see also in premium, you can say, well, let's run this for an hour.
Yeah.
Because you already pay for the provision machine. And that's the dial you can turn yourself. You can switch it. You can even scale it back to a normal consumption plan in mind if you want. You can do all kinds of tricks if you want. But still, if it works out of the box, that's the whole idea, of course. But that's one of the drawbacks. The vendor lock-in discussion, I always laugh a bit about.
Yeah, me too.
Because it's always like, you went now to Azure Functions, or you went to Lambda, or whatever. So you're locked in. Yes, of course, you have a dependency and you got hooked. But that's because all the extra stuff that they provide, that is actually the lock-in, like the bindings and all the nice stuff.
That's the Autoscale controller. Yeah.
That is the lock-in, but that's exactly the code you didn't write.
Yeah.
So you didn't buy into that yet. If you would not want that lock-in, you need to learn a stack or write something yourself. And there are, of course, open solutions that help you with that.
Sure.
But I think just saying, you get a vendor lock-in, I don't want a vendor lock-in in Azure Functions, so I'm building my own. I think that's not a really good one.
And as an addition to that one, I also think that Microsoft did see what was happening with the discussion around vendor lock-in. So then dependency injection came into place, right, for Azure Functions.
Yep.
And as far as I'm concerned, as soon as you leverage all the power that triggers and bindings and functions give you, however, everything else you do, you abstract away by putting in an interface in between and then having something like a storage.
It's pretty
repository.
portable.
Yeah,
Your code is still pretty portable.
You can use
the only
any
issue
storage.
is if you want to put it somewhere else, you might need to build all the stuff functions gave you. But I did implement the functions just as a runtime on itself in a private environment, or you can throw it on a container.
True.
So there are options to lift it and to in the end run it.
You can run it on a Docker container in AWS.
Yeah, indeed. But if you cannot, like the only discussion, like you cannot have n Lambda and Azure functions running the same thing and then sharing code like that. That will be complicated. So, but I didn't see a lot of successful multi-cloud implementations yet in the wild.
No, most of them are so abstracted away that it's not a cloud solution anymore. It's just a software solution.
Then it's a hosting solution.
Yeah, and one of the hosting options you have is either the one cloud or the other.
So, So polling.
Yeah,
something.
That's one I wrote
topic
down.
Sometimes.
Yeah, because still, I love the the triggers and the bindings that Azure Functions provide you, or Logic Apps for that matter, because they also
blob
have
storage or whatever. Like if you put
bindings.
something in there, it just gives
triggers,
you an event. Yeah.
However, it's still a form of polling. In the end, the runtime is actually looking into your storage account to see if that file was added, and if it was, it actually triggers your function. But it's still a form of polling, which means it's still a form of using something that has CPU and or network resources needed to find out what's happening. And also it's not instant, which means in very special scenarios, it could be that you adding a blob in your container takes 10 minutes to actually trigger the function that triggers based on that blob being added.
Yeah.
Because of all kinds of optimizations and if it's not running or if it's not hot, then it might take a lot of time. But there's also solutions for that. So that's the reason why we had it here, so we can have it for the part after what's new. This is one of the things that I wanted to discuss, and I think that actually matches up quite nicely with the intro that we gave. If you look at Azure.com, what's serverless now, according to them, they of course have compute, which has Logic Apps and which has Azure Functions, but it also has App Service.
Yeah, that started out
mentioned under
definite platform as a service.
Yes, and I think it still is, because you still specify, I would like to have this compute tier, which means I have this amount of cores and this amount of memory, and of course you can autoscale, but still you specify something, and the same with.
You cannot go to 0 there.
No, you can't.
Yeah, the free, but
yeah,
let's keep that as a developer option.
Let's not do that one. Yeah. But then, for instance, it also has Logic Apps, which I said, but then API management is also something that they have next to it, where I think that's more something. Is it software as a service? I wouldn't call it serverless, because it's a service that they provide you, but it has nothing to do with the amount of cores it runs on.
Then we get back to we have this definition, we have this site where we want to go, and we now call it serverless, which is really hip. So jump on it. We have a whole month to talk about it.
Every year.
If those services slowly just got branded, also slowly crawl to that it fits the definition properly, I think why not?
Yeah. But the reason I wanted to have this one in here, because for instance, Azure DevOps is also under DevOps and developer tools. Azure DevOps under there.
That's definitely software as a service to me, but like let's not have the discussion.
Although you also have the build agents again, where you okay, so but in the end, the reason I had this slide in here, this is what Azure.com states. It's already changed a lot in the last couple of months, and I think it will change in the future. But the reason I had it in here is to make clear serverless is moving, and we are all finding out what is serverless, what is PaaS, what is SaaS. Maybe there's a gray area between them. I think this is a nice overview of.
I think in the end, like this is the promise of cloud.
Yeah.
We can have all kinds of definition there, but this is cloud computing. This is the way you should work in the cloud.
At its best, because you can scale to 0 or scale to 1 million.
Yeah, have all the tools you need, all the control you need. You can pick from a menu. So we have some menu, but it's different than the original pizza as a service.
Yes, it is.
But the interesting is like because we are talking about functions for a while, we're talking about the Logic Apps. But you have something about the actual storage from databases and That's really interesting because that is new. Is that still a preview?
Well, actually, that's a nice bridge to the first one, which is SQL Database Serverless, which is, if I'm not mistaken, out of preview.
Yeah.
And what they actually do there is it's a specific type of compute tier for your SQL database, which automatically scales compute based on the load that you have. And then it bills you for the amount of compute used per second. And that's something that I think is very important because a few slides in, I will remind you of this moment. It bills you for the amount of compute per second, which I think is very nice. Which means if you have one query running on 20 cores because it's very heavy and the rest of the hour you don't do anything anymore, you just pay for those 20 seconds.
Yeah, so if you have a really spiky workload, you only pay for those.
This is truly for spiky workloads. It automatically pauses databases if it's inactive, and then only your storage is built, and then you actually don't pay anything for SQL. You just pay for the fact that your data is stored somewhere, and those prices are, well, very, very low. And it automatically resumes the database as soon as something happens again. So if there's a login to the SQL database, then it will automatically spin up the database again. But of course, like with anything that you completely shut down, it then has a cold start.
Has a cold start.
Yeah, it does have a cold start. So if you configure SQL Serverless, SQL Database Serverless, those
names,
you can specify the max and min amount of vCores that you want to run it on. And what you actually do is you define the range of
We went to DTUs. What is this? vCores?
Yeah, that's the new way of specifying stuff. And now the cool thing is, based on the amount of vCores that you specify, you get an X amount of memory and you don't get to choose in serverless.
Okay.
So if you have the minimum of vmin is half a core. Okay, it's half a core. And then the max is, if I'm not mistaken, 40 cores.
Yeah.
But if you drag the max all the way up to 40, then your min is automatically 5.
Okay, you
there's a correlation
probably to a different set.
Yeah,
availability set, or like.
Yeah, but also
better hardware. I don't know.
Yeah, but also, and I don't think that's on one of the slides, so I need to say that at least. Now I remember it, is the fact that in the period that your database is still running, but it's lower than your minimum amount of cores that you specified, you pay for the minimum amount of cores that you specify. Which means if you put the high one up to 40 because you think, hey, then I can always scale to 40 cores, then you're always paying for 5 if there's anything happening in your database. While if you have only 4 max, then your min is a half a core. So then you only pay for half a core if anything is happening in your database, which is below what you specified as a minimum. So there's a thing to take into account there. And then, as I said, memory and IO limits are proportional to the vCore range. And then it auto pauses, which means you can specify a minimum time period of 1 hour where you say, okay, so if 1 hour nothing happens in my database, shut it down. And then whenever something happens, bring it back up. So what does
you can define the cool off period.
Yes.
So if you know your workload, and you know this is happening, like we have this a lot, and then within 15 minutes we get multiple events. So don't put the cooldown at 10 because then you will drop. But if you put it to an hour, then at least we don't pay it through the night, for instance.
True. So the cooldown minimum period is an hour, and the max is 8 days.
8 days?
7 or 8. Yeah, it's long. So if you have, for instance, the end of month processing of hours or salary, that might take a couple of days.
Oh, cool. I can really use this for my personal website because it only has compute when I post something.
And the rest of the time is just static, right?
Yeah, it's free.
Cool. Well, if we look at the image that's on screen right now, you can see the orange lines is the amount of cores that you actually used in your database. So around 10, you can see the orange line going flat. So there's nothing happening in the database anymore. And then within the first red rectangle, it actually says this is the inactive period, which means that in that inactive period, you still pay the vmin.
That's the one you really configure.
Yeah, so you configure the blue line at the 1 and the yellow line at the 4. Those are your min and max amount of cores. But that also means that after around 5 in the afternoon, you can see the amount of cores used drop below the minimum. So between 5 and 10, you pay for 1 vCore, even though your processing power used is actually under the minimum you specified. You pay at least for the minimum if something's happening.
Okay, but that's interesting because so you're paying for a minimum that is not in use at the moment.
True.
So it still has a cold start, even though you're paying for something.
No, then it doesn't have cold start because in the period where you see the green lines about vCores build,
yeah,
that's the period your database is actually still active. And the inactive period is nothing is happening, but we're still having it up and running for you if you need to. So that's the cooldown period. And then after that cooldown period, you see the second rectangle with paused. That's where you actually don't pay anything because an hour in front or the specified time you had up front, nothing was happening. So we shut it down. And then in the shutdown period, you don't pay anything.
Okay.
But you have to keep in mind that you get billed for the amount of vCores you specify as a minimum if there's less capacity needed than the minimum.
Okay.
So take that one into account. So something by the numbers about SQL Serverless, auto resuming is in the order of approximately 1 minute. So if you have an ASP.NET website which is not running auto on, and then you have a SQL Serverless database behind it, and the first user in the morning is gets the crap twice because he has 2 cold starts. Yeah,
but that's something you should take into account. If you have like the office hour workload, and maybe sometimes at night. But if that's your main thing, you could schedule a ping at 8 o'clock in the morning,
and then use a serverless option for that one. So I have a function that actually starts at 7:30 in the morning and logs into the database, which is enough.
Hit everything, go.
I mean,
and you don't and from there on, it is a continuous pattern that has a cooldown period. Probably might die down at lunch. Yeah. But that's it. You will pay less. And if in the end you're getting hit by people wanting to work from home in the middle of the night, maybe a different option is better for you.
Yeah, true.
Know your workload patterns. Otherwise, it's just guessing. And the problem with that is, but I use serverless, but it was more expensive than just running one machine all the time. Yes, because you didn't take into account what you're actually doing with it.
Because of choices. Yeah, true.
So it works, and it's amazing what it can do in the proper circumstances, but choose wisely.
But we're coming back to that one at the end of the presentation. You should always choose wisely. So nice. Auto pausing the database is in the order somewhere between 1 and 10 minutes probably because of optimization. So it doesn't necessarily take a stopwatch and say, okay, so now you have your inactive period, I'm going to shut you down. That might take some time, but that's not interesting because it's shutting down. And then I see a really nice typo in auto pause. Auto pause. The minimum, as I said, is 60 minutes, and then yes, the maximum is 7 days, and you can increase it by 10 minutes, 10-minute intervals. So you can do 1 hour and 10 minutes, but you can't do 50 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. Just for you to know. One very important thing, by the way, there are a couple of gotchas as far as SQL Database Serverless goes. Since we don't have time for them today, we will be recording another video which we dive a little bit deeper into SQL Database Serverless, and then we'll also discuss the gotchas. So I'll keep the website, or at least the Serverless September page. Hit that refresh button and see the content coming in. Yeah. Now, next to SQL Database, of course, we also have Cosmos DB.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, but Cosmos is awesome, right? I mean, it's awesome.
It's almost everything.
It's almost everything. It's a very fast NoSQL database with a lot of open APIs. It's awesome in bold even, but also sometimes maybe for relative small workloads, it might get a bit expensive.
I've heard people calling it cost most database.
Really?
Yeah,
I didn't hear that yet.
But if you use this for the wrong reason or you don't optimize it, your request units might go up. Let's say that.
Yeah.
And indeed, for most storages, and especially SQL, there's a really low entry level point, and they also worked on that. Cosmos DB.
True.
The pricing changed in a couple of years, and the features just got added. So I think we are on the moment that especially adding this newest feature, having it scale down and scale up, the fast scale. So let's go through them, because this will add in some scenarios, will remove this problem in some scenarios actually.
Well, one of the things that I think is really good that they did is they now have a free tier available, which means you get the first 400 RUs and 5 gigs of storage in the account for free.
So you can play around, especially on your personal VPN subscription.
Or maybe even, for instance, if you run an Azure function that's an API that uses table storage because it's really fast in accessing information, but you want to have it globally distributed, and I mean, then Cosmos would be an awesome solution, but for just an API running on a function with just some table storage, having a Cosmos DB being provided at a minimum of 400 RUs per unit when you create one would be too costly.
Yeah.
Since storage account has table storage as well, and that's almost for free. So now you have this free tier, and you can have a shared throughput database with up to 25 containers that share.
Okay, so there's some extra limits there.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, there's actually quite a few extra limits. For instance, you can have exactly one free tier in a subscription.
In the subscription?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's
an extra one.
Yeah. And you opt in on creating the Cosmos DB. So as soon as you say this one gets the free tier, you cannot choose that anymore.
You claimed it. Yeah.
Yes, and then it's within that subscription. So for me, this was an extra reason. While they have in the Azure portal now role-based access control rolled out really decently, would still be a reason to have production be a separate subscription even from my dev and acceptance environment, because that enables you to also have that free tier running in your production environment, or at least have the first 400 RUs be free instead of pay.
On the other hand, we're all professionals.
True.
If you're using this in a professional setting and you're making money with it, I think having just a paid 400 RUs account for development isn't that expensive, because
that is
what
also
is that, €8 a month or something?
I'm not really sure.
22, I don't know. But like,
yeah, I totally agree. But
the discussion is more costly.
It has been now already.
Yes.
So you can have a shared database with a minimum of 400 RUs, and then all containers can share the throughput. But you can have, if I'm not mistaken, also exactly one shared database for the entire 400 RUs.
Yeah, and it's not. Yeah, it's the 400, so you can also not put the scaling on the container itself.
Nope,
because it's
on database level. Yeah, since it's shared. Yeah, if that's the way you choose to do it. You can also have one container and assign the full 400 RUs to that container. Yeah. But then you can just not use it on a different container. So either you choose a shared throughput database, and then all containers
and it's the minimum amount. So this is smart.
Yeah, they give you a lot of freedom in how to configure it.
Yeah.
And then what we actually, of course, wanted to dive into was the Cosmos DB Serverless, because they now have a serverless tier for Cosmos.
That is, but it's still preview, right?
This is still in preview, yes. And what's really interesting, and again, there's quite a few gotchas and other limitations on Cosmos DB serverless when you compare it to normal Cosmos DB, but everywhere in the documentation, Microsoft says
it's only during the preview period.
No, not entirely. They're saying we might and probably will lift some of these restrictions. Please give us feedback on which restrictions you think are okay to leave on there, or which we should take off.
Oh, but that's proper preview with feedback. And
True.
Like if you have a good scenario, you can give them your scenario and like, well, this is right. I just need a bit more, and I now would need to get a completely different service. It's really nice that they're defining the product that it actually suits the customers.
True, and so they actually I've seen at least 2 documentation pages on docs.microsoft.com that actually said, here's the email address, give us your feedback so we can make decent choices based on your feedback.
Because it is indeed, it's scaled to max of 4,000 RUs, and you have
and you always have a 10%
minimum.
As minimum. Yep.
It's really interesting. But it is, if it's not used, it will go back in 0 scale.
True.
Like this.
True.
But
no minimum charge.
Minimum charge. So if it's not used at all, is this also by the second?
That's 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 why I wanted to. I'm not really sure if that comes back.
I thought we had a graph on that, but
yeah, I think we have a graph on that, but let's no. And that's where actually I think I'm not really sure if that was now serverless or the Autoscale. I think it's serverless.
Yes.
Yes, it's serverless. You pay the max amount of request units you used in the hour.
In the hour slot. So it's a graph with like squares per hour.
Yes.
If you peak, so if you have the spiky workload that is like, well, once in 10 minutes we have one burst of consumption, really inefficient query on it because you didn't choose your partition keys right or whatever. We can go in a different video a bit deeper into Cosmos, and we already have some videos on it. But then the RUs get really high, and then like, yeah, we only had one user today checking in every 10 minutes, and you pay full 4,000 RU.
But so even if he does so every hour, and that's where I think there's a big difference between SQL Database Serverless and Cosmos DB Serverless. You pay for the highest peak of the hour, which means if somebody at 10:59 runs a query that actually takes you 4,000 RUs,
you were spending 2 hours.
The entire hour.
Well, you'll probably, if it's 59, you'll probably, if it goes into the next hour, spend 2.
Yeah, because both hours then have the spike. So that's something to really take into account. Yes.
I think the first feedback we can give there is like cut it back to at least 10 minutes or something.
Yeah, I think that might be a good addition. Again, Microsoft says everything that's happening around Cosmos DB Serverless probably will or might change because it's a preview right now. So give them the feedback.
And we still also don't know if the pricing model is different for the RUs, right?
No, true.
It's because I can assume if they, if it's really optimized for you as a customer and it's really nice, then there's no way of paying the normal tier, because if the pricing is the same. So there's probably going to be a different pricing model where the RU units are a bit, the RUs are a bit more pricey.
Yeah, but then still cheaper when you.
Yeah, cheaper in a scenario.
Yeah,
but not in every scenario. Like all the other options, someone needs to make money here. I guess.
Sure.
And like it costs a lot to run this infrastructure, but it is another offering which you should check out if it might suit you. Yeah. And if it does, it will help. And then in extreme cases, you might peak one day a month or one day a year, some closing or some big batch job. It's like, well, this wasn't really efficient. You could think about even changing your tier. I don't know if that will be possible.
Yeah, that's a good question.
This is new, and we will certainly keep an eye on it. Give some feedback, because I know someone who is playing with this.
And let's have us even further dive into how it actually works and in a later video. Yeah. Again, in the interest of time. The third option for Cosmos DB right now is Autoscale. They used to call it Autopilot, which I think was cooler, but they have it called Autoscale now. And what Autoscale actually does is it automatically and instantly, that's a big thing, scales the throughput, so the amount of RUs of your database or container based on usage. So,
but it was also already the case that the scaling option that was available in Cosmos, even you needed to pull the slider by hand, but it was almost instantly. Yeah, you could really just run a job, have some log running. I did it once for a demo and just scale it up to 4,000, up to 10,000, and you set your.
And then when the scale got too high, it asked, "Are you sure?" Because this is going to cost you.
Like, well, then it will actually above a certain scale, it will ask you. It's like if you want this, fine. Because there is no limit on that slider.
Please keep in mind.
And this might take a few minutes, but before that, it's provisioned somewhere and it's there. Yeah, that's really nice.
And then the cool thing with Autoscale is it does that for you. So if you have a provisioned throughput of 10,000 RUs, but you know that every once in a while, a very big request comes in and you might want to have just a little bit more, Autoscale can help you because it will dynamically scale based on what your application actually needs. So I think that's a very cool addition that they have available right now. And again, for the gotchas, see the videos.
See the details.
In the future. Yeah. I see that we have to start rushing a bit because we have 14 minutes left.
Oh, we never have this problem.
Never had it before. So one of the things I would like to stress a little more, bring into attention is Event Grid, because I think Event Grid is an awesome solution that Microsoft provides inside of Azure. but
it's
you
still
don't see a lot about
hidden.
it. Yeah,
Because it's not a service by itself. Well, it is.
Yeah, it is.
Somewhere.
Yeah. But you need to know where to find it.
Yeah, and it's in every resource where it's available.
Yeah. But you have been seeing blades that are called events right now, and they actually abstract away a lot of creating an event grid.
This has been there for 3 years, I guess.
Yeah, if not 4, yeah.
And it has a good scenario, because you talked earlier about the polling problem. Like some things going to storage, going to like all those Azure resources are actually for the bindings, for instance, solved by polling, because like they're not really fully connected, those resources. You just need a connection string, and then what can you do? Cosmos has like the change feed where you can register to. So there are all kinds of things there, but it's all Azure.
Yeah.
And what they did is a couple of years ago, they started the event grid, and all the actual service and resources, like we have events, stuff coming in because you're hitting an API, stuff changing there. So we could make hooks out of that and have like an Azure-wide event grid.
It's like a grid of events.
Yeah, exactly. So that we can actually take advantage of that inside, for instance, Azure Functions or something to get the instant.
And then, you know, what I think the cool part is, Microsoft started out with Event Grid, and then they had Event Grid events, of course, they have their own model. But there's now a global, or at least a community-driven open source thing called Cloud Events, which is actually an Event Grid event, but then abstracted to a cloud event.
Yeah.
And Microsoft Event Grid also supports cloud events, which means that an event triggered in AWS can come into our event grid and pull and trigger my Azure function real time.
That is an interesting option. Like
it is. So it's the managed event routing platform, and then it enables you to react in real time to changes in Azure resources to your own application, because you can create those events custom for your application as well.
Yeah. So you could use it as a replacement for your service bus, right?
True. It even has a 24-hour exponential back-off retry mechanism of actually getting your event to.
But they're push events. It's a bit different. Yes. Normally we register as like, let's open a socket and we start listening, and well, with service bus that's pretty instant.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's all events. It's all events incoming.
Yeah. So that's also the reason why you have options to be filtering on event types or on prefix or suffix. It says here it's built to scale. It can handle millions of events per second, which is.
But like, if you imagine what's happening on that infrastructure all day, like, and they're just pushing those events out, no matter if you registered on it or not.
Yeah, they're there. So that opens up a whole new serverless possibility. And then I'm going to rush a little bit to the concepts, because in the end it comes down to 5. The events are what happened, and then the event source is where did it happen, and then the topic is, dude, anybody interested? Here's an event that happened, and if you have a subscription, you will get the message.
So this pops up construction?
Yep. And then the subscriptions are, hey, I have an application, I'm interested in that event, so if any comes in, give it to me. And then I actually thought, well, what happens if your application is down, but you do have a subscription, and then an event comes in? Actually, from the topic down to the subscription, there's sort of a queue, which means if your application comes online in 10 minutes, you'll still get the event. So it is kept for you there for the 24 hours that I mentioned with the retry mechanism to actually. But
the initial call will be quite instant. And if it's not there, you will go in that back off.
Yes, true. And then the last thing is the event handlers who need to handle what's happened with the event. So if you look at this overview, it's relatively simple. We have event sources, which could be blob storage or IoT hub or event hub or the container registry or signal R. There's a lot of stuff that already triggers events or throws events. They throw them into the event grid, and then from event grid you can automatically trigger things like functions, logic apps, but also, for instance, Azure automation, which means if you specify it correctly, you could create, based on event grid, something that as soon as a VM is created in your subscription, you automatically run specific types of configuration scripts on that VM to make sure it's never without company policy or firewall rules, specific ones. So you can automate away everything based on events, which means the VM is never well, in danger or.
Yeah, that's really. But sometimes it's really hard for me to place it event grid, because on one hand it's like it feels like an infrastructure solution, and like we could automate our own scale or our own options there, or provisioning or something. But on the other hand, like it's a really nice messaging system.
True.
That we could use as a high performance messaging system within our software.
Yeah.
But we also don't want to mix them. So also, it's sometimes I can imagine you can make a big mess out of this one if you don't.
Yeah, but that's
you don't have a plan.
Yeah, that's with everything, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the reason why Microsoft even has a very lengthy article on choosing the right messaging service, and then it, if I'm not mistaken, compares Event Grid with Event Hub and Service Bus.
Yep.
And they actually show you that they
all have a place there.
There's a decent solution for.
At some point, there's like how many messaging systems can they make? But it is if you have a case, you can get someone who knows this stuff. But
they can help.
If you choose the incorrect one in the case, you're solving all kinds of issues that you shouldn't have.
True. True.
So
in the interest of time and the fact that I would like to give people the chance to have some questions at the end, because the Q&A is open. I'm not really sure if we mentioned that, but it is.
It is.
So if you look at, as far as I'm concerned, serverless is the next evolution of the cloud, or maybe even a revolution in the cloud, because 10 years ago, if somebody would have said that this would be possible, I would have not maybe been sure of the fact that it would be available in 10 years.
But we don't know what to do with it 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, I mean, everything's changing, and I think serverless is something that's really fitting a lot of scenarios that would be interesting for cloud computing, but then maybe still be very costly or whatever. But then serverless comes in and it gives you the extra opportunity to use the cloud in an even more efficient way, having faster systems with better integration and sometimes at less cost. And then, yeah, as we said, it's very interesting because of cost, but also time to market and productivity with the triggers and bindings that we talked about. But one of the things that's really important to remember is the law of the instrument. And then everybody knows, I mean, everybody says if your only tool is a hammer, then everything around you looks like a nail. Yeah, and then if you have that hammer in your hand, you might feel a bit like this guy.
Yeah.
You know, you might think I can handle the world and just.
Yeah, I know a trick. I now know Azure Functions, so I'm gonna do everything with it.
Yes, and then because of the law of the instrument, please be sure, because we're not entirely sure a hammer is always the best tool for the job.
Some things you shouldn't need a hammer.
So I think one of the things we want to say is serverless is awesome, but please be conscious of the choices you make. You don't have to be even very careful, but be conscious. Take a choice because it's the right thing to do. And then that's the next bullet on this slide. Do not use something because it's hot or because everybody's working with it or because it's hip or it enables you to attract more developers to your company. Use it because it's the best solution.
Yeah, and then don't jump on it, indeed, because it's interesting right now and everyone's talking about it. If it doesn't suit your team of developers, your company, your specific problem, you will get burned by it.
Yeah,
because it is hot. And the issue is then you will also say next time, like, no, that doesn't work for me.
Yeah, don't do server.
This is a crappy solution. Like, it's not for us. But it is evolving constantly, and people are getting feedback and using it differently. So in the end, maybe in a few years it might be, or your team might be ready for it, and it would be a waste to then dismiss it.
Yeah.
I think with serverless, like I've been talking about serverless for 3 years at least now.
Yeah.
1 month a year, I can talk about it all the time. But I think right now it is like there's a solution for everyone in most offerings, and it's really mature for either the enterprise or the startup or someone just wants to change something. And I've seen solutions in the actual product they're building, fine, but also sometimes in the infrastructure around it.
Yeah.
You see a lot of IT people just automating stuff with a few lines of code,
Yeah.
where they used to throw in PowerShell, or they still use a PowerShell in Azure Functions.
Yeah, you can
Why
do
not?
that as well.
So know what's there and use it for the right job.
And then if you start using it, be sure to monitor what you're doing.
Definitely, that is an important one.
Yeah, I added that one because
otherwise, end of the month with the bill, you will know what happened, or that something happened at least.
Yeah. Yeah, but also because of, for instance, eventing or messaging or whatever structure you're using to do the communication between different serverless solutions. If something happens or something goes wrong or something breaks, it's really a problem if you have 17 Azure Function applications running and you're not really sure where the issue is. You should monitor. You should have logging in place, or at least application insights in place with Azure Monitor to enable you to see, okay, so it went there and then there and that happened, and oh, wait a minute, here's something.
But you can create a runaway chains of tasks there.
Yeah.
That might loop. You might. I didn't say that I've seen this happening once, but like, for instance, you monitor a dead letter queue, and your process throws an exception in an Azure function. This will scale completely for weeks.
But there's no frustration there.
And it works. That's really nice. You can really test it, like that the infrastructure actually does what it says, but you will get the bill. Like, and if you're not using this efficient, really monitor what you're doing, if it's doing what you designed it to be done. Because this is a risk, and not only for your cost yourself, but you might just DDoS
external services or your own services, if they're not autoscaling.
Yeah, so be careful there. I think we're concluding this. Keep an eye on resources, because we're going to make some deeper dives, some more more technical talks around this, going into the portal, showing the stuff that's actually there, and just everything we find. We're also throwing on the page of the Serverless September. If you are on Twitter or anything, like, you will probably see the Serverless September hashtag come by. It will pop up. People are using that when they want to share something cool. We're just echoing all nice blog posts we see and videos and stuff. We're making a couple of our own for this month, and we'll publish them this month to YouTube, all of them. And the content collection on dev.to. On the bottom. We are linked it also on the top one, I think. Yeah,
we did.
So that's from a Microsoft or Cloud Advocates initiative that's combining those, I think.
Yes, true. And they're actually doing also, if you're interested, every Friday. They have a Serverless September Friday, and they actually go live on Twitch, and they do all kinds of cool stuff based off of serverless. So if you're a Twitch viewer, or you find this interesting, or you have content that you would like to bring into their attention, then you can use the hashtag Serverless September Friday. That's the live online streaming from a couple of dev advocates from Microsoft that are showing off pretty cool stuff on serverless. Cool. So
yeah, that was it for today. I think if you have anything, we don't have Q&A, but if you have any questions later, any specific questions that you don't want to throw in a Q&A, I think you will be able to find us. We can talk about it. Maybe you want to invite us over to chat with the team to talk about a specific problem, or you want to migrate, because we did the cloud sessions a long time, and I think they're still valuable for a lot of companies that are not there yet, or they want to go into the next step using this nice stuff.
There's so much nice stuff to play with.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Then, I'm keeping a last eye on the Q&A, but I'm not seeing anything coming in.
No.
So for now, I would like to thank everybody for being here today. Make sure to look at the website on bert.nl/serverless-september and get your latest content there. And then we'll hope to see you soon.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.